everyone, and welcome to Wild Moments brought to you by explore.org. It's me, Trishala, and we have none other than Mike Fitz in his natural environment.
Good to be with you,
How are you
Trishala.
doing, Mike? Nice.
I'm doing
Tell
well.
us a little bit about
It's a nice day.
Yeah. And you're expecting to see a
Sorry.
moose walk between you.
I would hope so, but they tend to be a bit wary of people noises. So if I'm doing any talking, then they might not approach.
Well, we'll keep a keen eye. I mean, everybody knows how much I love moose. Would that be mooses? Is the correct plural?
I think it's just moose.
It's just moose, yeah. I just think of
Yeah.
mongoose and mongooses.
Oh,
Anyway,
okay.
we're
Yeah.
super excited.
Yeah.
Yeah, super excited to have Mike with us. And we're going to have some really awesome clips and some really awesome discussions, hopefully. We've only got 4 clips today, but you know, Mike and I tend to prattle on quite a bit. So we have 45 minutes to go through these clips. And of course, you can answer or you can ask any questions and send through any comments because we're live and interactive. And if I am a little bit not so energetic, I'm still not feeling well. We discussed it on Tuesday, but hopefully I'll be better very, very soon. And also, my internet is not great. I'm still in Johannesburg. So if any of those disruptions, my sickness or my internet, cause you to turn away, please don't, because we do have cool clips and cool discussions. So I don't have any hellos coming through just yet, but I'm sure that, right on time. Kaoru says, hi, Trishala and Mike. You have milk today. And thank you, Kaoru, for telling us how you're enjoying the show. I can predict that Mike has got some good old-fashioned room temperature water. Am I right? Very nice.
That's it.
I'm in the same boat, although I must admit that my water has been chilled. I hope it's acceptable. Amber Co says, happy Thursday to all. Thank you to everyone that works to bring these wonderful shows to us. Very much appreciated. And you're waving to both of us. We're waving back at you. And you're enjoying a coffee and a donut. Woo, decadence. Tris Vissop says, hello everyone. I hope today gremlins have no access to the internet. Thank you very much. I hope so too. Dia NC says, hello, Trish and Mike from sunny Seattle. And you've got your coffee and you're ready for the show. Great. And so it's one of the things, actually, Mike, that we were discussing on Tuesday and even a little bit last week, Thursday. Here in the Southern Hemisphere, we're all kind of, the temperatures are getting cooler. Everything's getting drier. And the comments that have been coming through is, oh, the spring dawn chorus has been beautiful and the birds are chirping and it's sunny. And it's such an interesting thing. I mean, we know this happens from a geographical perspective, but it's such an interesting thing when you have a community and half of them are enjoying the warm weather and the rest are cool. Well, I mean, today is not very cold, but it's definitely that you can feel the air changing. How's the weather at your end now?
It's quite pleasant. The past few days, we've had fairly mild temperatures. I don't know. You might consider it cool. I mean, it's been 5°C at night, something like that. But during the daytime, it's been quite comfortable. And there's no biting insects out yet. We were talking about this before the show. I have a really brief window, but when the snow melts. And then it's like 2 or 3 weeks before the biting insects come out. So I couldn't do a show this relaxed coming up towards the end of May or early June. But I think that's one of the wonderful things about the Explode.org community is that we can connect with people around the world and share our experiences. Like it's so interesting to consider how Africa is undergoing a different transition than what I'm experiencing in North America. It's just so different. Or even seeing other places in North America on Explode.org that are very green right now. The grass hasn't greened up where I live, the trees are just breaking bud right now. So we're still kind of like on the cusp of spring. Spring is here, but we're not
Yeah.
fully there yet.
Yeah, it is. And it's one, like you said, it's such a wonderful thing about having a community of people around the world that are just interested in wildlife and wild spaces, and we can instead of just reading and understanding it from a very factual perspective, we can almost feel it from each other, the difference and the changes. It's very cool. Um, lastly, Rolling Trouble has rolled in and says, hi, Trishala and Mike from Washington. Coffee and water, we knew it. And Mindy Tiller Powers here too says, hello, I'm working in the office today, ready to chat and learn. Mindy, you join us pretty often from the office. We hope that you don't get in trouble. But keep on sending us chats. Send us questions. We love talking to you. So to start, let's head over to one of probably our favorite cameras and one of our favorite leopard characters, because tomorrow is International Leopard Day, so we can chat all things leopard. But first, let's have a look at our clip. Oh, it's always such a treat to see a leopard. It often feels like the jewel in the crown of an African wildlife experience.
And Trishella, this is one of your known leopards. Like this is an individual that you
Yeah,
that we've seen before on the cams.
yeah. So she's the Rosie's pan female. She's pretty much the only. I think she might be the only female we see on this cam. Occasionally, we see potentially her son. Oh, look at that stretch. Oh no. I think that injury of the left back foot fairly fresh. The scent marking.
Even though she's not placing weight necessarily on it, it seems like she still has mobility in it. You know, when she got up from the water, it was like, oh, this is kind of sore.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you know, it's of course we don't know how the leopard was injured, but yeah, I can't imagine trying to tackle prey as large as they do with just my bare hands. I mean, it's such a difficult task that who knows? Maybe she stepped on a thorn or something, and it's just a little sore there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, they have to make a living. They have a tough job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the she's definitely, like you said, got mobility in that back foot still. And she's probably, when she sees a prey item that's close enough to not have to expend herself too much, she's gonna go for it, and she is likely to put pressure on that leg anyway, in those moments. But I've seen leopards with injuries to the foot before, and they tend to recover pretty quickly from it. And her lifting it up so high and not even putting a little pressure on it if she doesn't have to, says to me that this is pretty fresh. I would say that in about 2 days, or even after a day, she might be able to put pressure on it. Really, what she is to have a space to lie down and assess it, lick it. If it is thorn or sand, you can try and pull it out. She just needs a bit of time. But she is an old leopardess. It's one that we've seen on the Rosie's cam for a long time. She's probably over 10 years old. Just visually, she looks about 10 years old. And in the wild, leopards can live up to about 15, sometimes 15. In captivity, obviously, a lot more. When we were before, sorry, I was just checking if there's any. There we go. Any more questions or hellos? We've got a few hellos, but I think that let's get chatting a little bit about this clip, and particularly the types of threats to leopards. This type of injury is a very almost I wouldn't say an insignificant injury, but because I can't say whether it's insignificant to her or not, but it doesn't look like the type of long lasting injury that would affect her survival long term. And what's really nice having Mike around is that we can kind of talk about differences in North America compared to in the Northern Hemisphere compared to what we experience here. And and I'm sure you must have seen injured bears or perhaps injured deers, maybe even in your backyard. What do you think if they've limped or injured a foot or a hoof? Have you seen them over time to kind of
Yeah,
be able to assess?
wild animals are so resilient. I mean, I think that's one of the things that we can admire about them.
Yeah.
And if I, stub a toe or something like that, or have some other, relatively insignificant injury, I sometimes I do think about that, and I think, what would a wild animal do? It wouldn't sit there and complain. It would just get up and go on with its life because it doesn't have a choice. So yeah, when and all animals are kind of experiencing that. I think that's one of the things that we have in common with them is the sense of the drive to survive. So it's, I think, with our community structures, it's a lot easier for us to rely on other people, but other animals
Yeah.
don't have that opportunity. So when they're injured or something like that, they just get on with it. During the summertime with brown bears in Katmai National Park, and those cameras will probably be going live in late June again. We often see bears that are injured, and sometimes with horrible injuries, like broken jaws and things like that, open wounds in their sides, and sometimes they survive those things really amazingly. So yeah, I always admire the toughness and the resiliency of these wild creatures because that's how they survive. That's how they make a living. You said this is an older female leopard. Uh, Perhaps she still has the opportunity to reproduce. I think you mentioned that she could have had a cub earlier this year, maybe she, but holding a good territory, that gives her the opportunity to continue to thrive in her own way.
Yeah, absolutely. And the injuries, even quite significant injuries. And just before the show, we were talking about things like snares and the effect that they have on leopards. And I'm talking about leopards specifically because it's International Leopard Day, but lots of or International Leopard Day tomorrow. But lots of animals in the wild get affected by snares. And recently, there have been quite a few leopards that I know who have been affected by snaring, and the injury can get so deep, right to the skin, and through the sinew, and right onto the muscle. And if it's noticed and treated quick enough, and remember that type of treatment is not, we're not taking the leopard out of the environment, taking it to a hospital. This is very, it's still qualified vets who deal with this kind of injury, but it kind of has to be done in a different way than how we would recover from an injury. You can maybe put a topical antibiotic, stitch them up, but you still got to leave them out to fend for themselves afterwards. And it's amazing the type of recovery that they can make if everything is aligned. And the thing is that sometimes it's not. Sometimes if it's a male leopard who's recently gotten territory, but there's another big male around, this is the exact opportunity that other big male would take to dominate. But sometimes it works out just right. And animals also know how to keep a low profile if they're injured. They're not going to go out advertising themselves, and they're going to prioritize their survival over anything else. Reproducing or going for big hunts. Even if the opportunity is there, they're going to prioritize their survival.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Animals live in a world of almost in like a sense of threat and bluff. Like you want to appear to be strong and tough. You don't want to show weakness because you're either,
Yeah.
if it's con specific, like another leopard, if you are a leopard, into that they can read through it.
Yeah.
If it happens with brown bear, it happens with maybe moose in my area during the rutting season. If you're kind of like a young cocky guy and you're a couple years old and you see a female around. You're like, hey, how's it going, lady? And then this bigger guy comes in and is like, listen, my man, this is not your
Yeah.
time. So you can't bluff your way out of that because the other dude is going to kick your butt.
Yeah.
So yeah, they want to show their prowess, but at the same time, other animals are going to call them out if they see through that.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's best if you're injured to keep a low profile so that others don't see that you're injured, essentially. Um, JJ, you'd like to know, would the park interfere if she couldn't hunt? Each each reserve kind of has their own set of rules and protocols around this, particularly if they're a private reserve. So some reserves may treat animals who are injured, even if it's not an injury from some kind of human intervention. Uh, but most reserves won't. If it is a result of some human interference, like a snare or poaching, that kind of thing, then they almost always, I haven't heard of a reserve that wouldn't intervene and do something about it. But this looks like a natural injury. It looks like she might have, I mean, like Mike said, I think she looks like she stepped on a thorn. I've seen the leopards who stepped on a thorn and had something, it might not have even pierced, but between the toes and the pads, there's a little gap. And sometimes they get something wedged. It's just the right angle so that when they put pressure, it hurts. But it's unlikely that reserves would do anything about this injury because it looks quite natural. How about in the reserves where around you, Mike? Do you think do they often intervene with those types of injuries?
Typically, no. One thing that I wanted to ask you about, Trishala, is how wildlife is considered or managed in, like say South Africa where you are, because in the United States, wildlife, no matter whose quote unquote property it's on, is it doesn't belong to anybody necessarily. It's like common sort of property in a sense. So if a
Uh,
deer is in my backyard, it doesn't belong to me. It belongs basically to the people of the state of Maine and to the United States. Even if it wanders across into like a state park boundary or like a private nature reserve or something like that. So generally, if an animal is injured and people feel like it's worth intervening, they either have to capture it, maybe take it to a licensed rehab center, if especially for like small mammals and things like that. And there are things that do that with larger animals like bears, but they if it was on some sort of state land, then or federal land, then a federal or state agency would be making those decisions rather than like a private individual. There's always sort of like those situations you see, those videos you see on social media or something like that, where someone will be like, oh, this animal is injured, and these helpful bystanders stepped in and and rescued it. Those things happen, but it's more or less an effort of federal, state, or tribal agencies that make those decisions. But is it different in South Africa? Like if it's on a private reserve, do the people who work for that reserve have that authority? Because that wouldn't necessarily be the case in the U.S.
yeah. So if it's a
Okay,
private reserve, the management of the private reserve makes that call. The only time there would be, I mean, even still, ultimately, the private reserves or the management would make a call on the animals that are in or on that property at the time. But if it is a very endangered animal, there might be other national protocol that they adhere to, but I haven't come across that very much. I think that in South Africa, um, private reserves. I mean, I don't want to offend national reserves, but because private reserves are a revenue stream for private people, if they have lodges and things like that, they tend to be a little quicker when it comes to attending to their animals. Also, private reserves tend to be smaller, and privately funded, so they have the resources to sort out problems pretty quickly. Whereas on the national scale, the resource availability, the amount of steps you've got to go through to make a decision can take time. And so I would, if I had to say, without offending African national parks, I would say that if you're an animal on a private reserve, you're probably going to receive treatment a little quicker than you would if you were on a national reserve. But they still do because it's still a priority. But you can imagine there's a little bit more hoops to jump through.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
that is certainly true of the situation in the United States. So if for example, if I wanted to uh, plant a different species of tree in my backyard, like I could go and do it. Like it would just take me the amount of time to buy the tree and put it in the ground. But you know, again, on a
Yeah.
state or a national level, it's a much more I guess thought out process. That bureaucracy has its advantages and its disadvantages.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yeah. Absolutely. And South Africa does a really good job of prioritizing their wildlife. Um, it's just that a lot of the time there's a significant amount of people, I mean, with human wildlife conflict, a lot of the reserves border on rural areas and villages that don't see any kind of upliftment from having these borders around reserves. So even though they do a very good job of taking care of the wildlife, they also have a lot more to fight against at the same time. So it's not that they're doing a bad job. It's just that if you have a private reserve, it's easier to manage it. Like you said, it's easier for you to just decide to plant a new tree in your backyard. Yeah. Um, yeah. So Mindy, oh, we have a lot of hellos coming through here. And then Title Pro, you also wanted to know, are there vets that can be sent to treat her foot? Similar to JJ, the answer is the same. It's unlikely. But if the reserve feels like an injury is affecting her ability to hunt to the extent where she could die, they might intervene. But because it's not a result of some human action, they probably won't. And that's also okay. It's not a bad thing. Leopards go, and many wildlife, they go through injury and illness and lots of things that can affect their immediate survival. But like Mike said, they're very resilient as well. And sometimes we want to take action very quickly, but like we would for ourselves. But a lot of the time, they do just fine. It's just a matter of giving them the opportunity to do what they do.
yeah. Often the best thing to do is just to leave the animal be. Protecting its
Yeah.
habitat is maybe the most important thing. Sometimes people will wonder why,
Yeah.
you know, and I feel it too. Like you see an animal that's injured and you feel empathy for it, and you know that it's feeling pain and it's suffering in its own way, and you want to step in and you want to help immediately. Uh, Sometimes I try to think through that, like what would be the most positive outcome for this animal. Certainly maybe it could be helping it individually, and individual animals do matter, but ensuring that their habitat is protected so future generations of these animals have these opportunities to live as their best life as wild animals, I think that's the most impactful thing that we can do
Yeah.
for them. So when anyone's, you know, when we're wondering like, hey, can we help this animal, often it's not possible to help an individual animal, but we can help more animals everywhere by ensuring that their habitat is protected.
Exactly. And then oftentimes we seem to kind of zone in on a specific species, but that species cannot thrive if the habitat that they live in doesn't exist or is getting destroyed. So species protecting a single species is nice because it's something we can attach to, so it becomes easier to for those flagship species to be something that your brain automatically connects with conservation. But ultimately, it's the habitat that hosts them that needs the most protection because that has longevity. Yeah, we have a few more. Oh, we have so, Mike, when you're around, we have so many hellos and questions. I love it.
Hello, everyone.
Uh, Mindy Tillipau says she's been monitoring a deer in your area with a broken leg. That's really interesting, Mindy. And you say it still has difficulty, or it has difficulty moving around at first, but it's been 3 weeks now and he's actually trying to use it. That's very, very cool. And I hope that you'll keep us updated on that particular deer. And I'm also so glad that you were able to watch him over time. That's an opportunity we don't often get to have. Andy says good afternoon. Aussie Jan 2 says good afternoon, all in all caps. Thanks, Aussie Jan 2. Jean Gale says good morning from Seattle. Just coffee and sun for you. Nice. Africa Rock says good morning, Mike and Trish from Michigan. Cafe Mocha in hand and excited for the show. And you're hoping that. Woo! One more called Tatu in Kenya. Oh, wow. Who lost the whole front limb when she was a cub. And when she was 3 years old, she was killed by lions. That's pretty good for a cub who has lost the front limb. I mean, cub mortality is something like 40 to 50% for a leopard cub that's under a year old, and she made it to 3, and that's pretty impressive. You go on to say that she climbed the trees, fed herself, and was most likely pregnant when she was killed. So a
Wow.
fairly successful yet short reign. Okay, and if we were just going to be talking for half an hour together, we would be out of time. But luckily, we're here for 15 more minutes. So let's leave leopards behind for now. Mike, is there anything you wanted to add before we move on to the next clip?
Well, no, I think since we're running short on time, let's get to it.
All right, let's go over to Vic Falls and have a look at that interesting situation with some vultures and a warthog. Now, if I were a vulture, I might also think that this warthog is dead.
Yeah, this is. It just opened its eye a little bit, but it's all. At first it was hard for me to see its breathing.
Now, Mike, I'm not sure if you've watched this cam before. They do a feeding in this area. Oh, a little too close.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that certainly got the warthog's full attention. With I get the eyeball is one of those parts that scavengers go after first because it's just like a soft orifice. It's an area to enter the body pretty easily.
Oh, yeah.
It's so interesting how though that like the warthog is just so relaxed around these other birds. Certainly does not consider them a threat at all, and the
And,
curiosity of the vultures too. Oh, I think we lost Trishala for a little bit. Maybe she'll be coming back in just a minute. I again, I don't know much about or much of anything about warthogs or vultures in Africa. However, birds are smart animals. They're curious animals. It used to be an insult to call someone a bird brain, but not anymore. We know that that birds are smarter than we gave them credit for in the past. So with that situation, it seems like the vultures may not. They may have recognized that that animal was alive, but they were wondering maybe how far they could push it. Trishala, are you back now? We lost you for a little bit.
I'm not sure. I see myself and I hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay,
I'm back.
we can hear you again. Yes.
Okay. Last I caught was that talking about the eyeball.
Yeah, yeah. It's just like a soft place for the animals a scavenger to access a body. So that's often one of the places that we see birds go after with with fish or dead animals. We see them poke at the eyeball. But I was also talking about how maybe the vultures were just curious about this animal itself. They're kind of testing their boundaries around the warthog, really wondering if it was actually dead. But they didn't have any of the
Yeah,
other cues that would tell them immediately that this thing has died. Like there's no predator around opening up the body, and that's to them it's like, hey, dinner has served. There wasn't anything like that in
yeah,
this situation.
exactly. To move over to a different Wi-Fi that helps. So excuse me for 5 seconds.
Okay. There is a sense, I think, also beyond curiosity there's also a sense of caution. There's the social dynamic among the different vultures, sort of safety in numbers, being able to test your boundaries around them. There's individual personalities. If we knew these vultures individually, I think we might see some that are more shy than others, some that are more bold. We see that certainly in condors in North America. Some have big, bold personalities. Others are a bit more reserved, and that dynamic could be at play with vultures. I bet at animal carcasses in Africa. Right. Well, we're still waiting for Trishala to connect. Maybe then we can perhaps. Oh, you're back. I can't hear you though.
Um,
Oh, now I can.
I
Okay.
just I just switch over to go off the Wi-Fi. It was just it really doesn't like past 4:30 clearly. But I could
Hmm.
hear most of what you were saying, and you had it. You got it.
All right. Well, sign me up for a guide in Africa, and I'll just BS my way through through any safari.
I was. I'm not sure if you touched on this, but I was. Vultures are really interesting, and one of the things I thought that they would go for, or one of the cues, would be smell, um, when they're trying to find. I guess, and you spoke a little bit, or at least what I caught of it was that they didn't have the normal cues that they would associate with something that was dead. But anyway, I had I was reading recently about vultures and their sense of smell and their eyesight, because the majority of areas where we find vultures here in South Africa are open areas, so they're not often um, closed, where a sense of smell would be better to detect carrion. And so many of the vultures that we see here in South Africa, or old world vultures, they tend to use their eyesight more than their sense, or is a little stronger than their sense of smell when looking for carrion. And the comparison was to a turkey vulture, who apparently has the biggest olfactory bulb compared to any vulture in the world. And those mitral cells, which are the cells that give your brain smell related information, they have the most compared to any other vulture. And the
Oh, I
reason
didn't know
was
that.
yeah, one of the reasons that was theorized is that because in closed environments, in more woody areas, where they can't use their vision as much, the sense of smell would be a lot more useful. That was just a tidbit I read and I wanted to share.
Well, that makes sense. Turkey vultures inhabit my area where I live, and you can see this is what it typically looks like, unless humans have cleared it. It's a lot of forest. So yeah, that would make a lot of sense. The dynamic. I wonder over the long term, though, or even the short term, if it's changing amongst turkey vultures, because roadkill, like highway deaths for animals, have really opened up opportunities for turkey vultures. They're probably one of the, like crows, for instance. They're one of the birds in North America that have expanded their range, and probably their populations have expanded over historic numbers because roads have provided them with so much more food than they ever would have had opportunities to
Yeah,
access in the past.
yeah, and I love there's so many little things that can affect an animal's survival, not just their survival, but how successful they are in certain areas. And things like roadkill or more roads, providing more road can it feels terrible to us, but it can be really beneficial for something like a scavenger and conditions positively. But speaking of scavenging, we just watch these scavengers. We're scavenging. There's somebody else who also wanted to have a bit of a scavenge at Naledi Dam. So let's head over and have a look at this clip. I love these. This is a civet.
And correct me if I'm wrong. These are carnivores, but they're feline-like carnivores. So they're not cats. They're kind of in their own family of carnivores, right?
Yeah, so they're feliformia, so cat-like carnivores. In fact, they're they're closely related to things like mongoose and also hyenas. And it's thought that the kind of the earliest hyenas, and there used to be actually pre or arboreal hyenas, they would likely look very much like a civet.
Hmm. Oh, and that certainly sniffed something out
Oh,
that was there. Do you have any idea what that
that,
might be?
ooh, it looks like a mongoose. We also thought maybe squirrel. Um, I guess it could be a dead squirrel, but it felt my first my gut response was that it was a mongoose.
It's certainly not enthusiastic about eating it. It's maybe it's maybe it's been well fed recently. I mean, there it goes finally, but it didn't. It's not eating it with the vigor that you see an animal that, like
Yes.
a carnivore. If it's gone many days without eating, you see it like this, the almost like a look of satisfaction on their face when they put food in their mouth and swallow
Yeah.
it. And this one is, it doesn't quite have that enthusiasm for its meal.
But that's something that that's also a clue, I think, because that lack of enthusiasm is something we see with any animal that ends up eating a mongoose. So I
Oh,
think that's
okay.
another it being a mongoose because they scent mark, and so an anal pouch that with this very strong smelling secretion, and it's something that um, quite a few feliformia have, in fact, including the civet and even hyenas. So it's never I've never seen an animal just pleasantly eating a mongoose. So I would definitely
They
say
just have an
that.
off flavor. It's like, I think this thing kind of is edible, but it's been in my fridge too long, and I guess I'll eat it anyway. I don't know. One of those things.
And this is a really nice discussion after talking about the vultures and this around using your eyesight or your sense of smell as the primary sense for finding prey. And here, that mongoose, I'm going to conclude it was a mongoose and making an executive decision. That mongoose was in the water. So the water would be masking some of that smell, but at the same time keeping a few of those volatile compounds nice and available to the. And volatile compounds are just compounds that are able to easily evaporate into the air. So it means that they can be smelly for longer and very easily. And with the civet, we also know that they produce this smelly odor as a form of defense and for marking. So if an animal generally is able and put a lot of investment and energy into producing something specialized, it usually has the mechanics to detect that thing too. So if animals are producing low frequency sounds, they're very likely to be able to hear low frequency sounds. And I think that with the civet, it produces so much smelly things that's very likely that it can pick up on great scents all over the place too.
It's amazing to consider
Uh,
how the experience of animals is can be so similar and so different from ours. Our sense of smell, for instance, exists. I mean, we know it's a powerful sense. It affects our mood. It affects our memories. But there are other animals that live in a world of odors that we just cannot imagine. I mean, their sense of smell is orders of magnitude greater than ours. And just to see them move about the landscape, especially many of these nocturnal animals, and see how they
mhm,
sense the presence of other animals just through their sense of smell is really quite incredible.
absolutely. And it's being able, when we think about if I could have one superpower, or if I could be one animal, what would it be? And I think that sometimes get overlooked is having senses that allow you to see the exact same world that we're living in, but to see it from a different perspective. Maybe it's more layers, maybe it's fewer layers, but it's you'll never know.
I think if we had a sense of smell like many animals, like an elephant, for example, or a bear, we would be overwhelmed. I don't think our brains could compute what was going on. It would be such a strange sensation for us.
Absolutely, exactly. Um, but it's such an interesting thing, and I often think about elephants, and I think about birds, have being able to see in the way that birds do, what that must feel and look like, and what that does in your brain, processing wise, how much it takes up. Um, but that's a discussion for another time. That's going into superhero territory. Let's head over to our last clip just so that we can have a fun and watch something cute and funny, and then we'll say our goodbyes. Oh, beautiful, Keston. Thank you very much.
That is a hard to reach area.
It amazes me that for such a large, sometimes clunky animal, they can be quite flexible when they need to, particularly if they're itchy and they really need to get that itch.
Yeah,
It's
this
pretty cool.
elephant too. It's like going after, it's itching all of the parts that it can't really scratch very
Yeah,
easily. So, kind of like on its side, it was using the backside of um, its trunk.
of its
Now
trunk.
it's
Yeah.
its leg, ankle area, wrist actually, front leg, but now maybe going for the ankle.
Those are, I mean, when you find a great scratching post, you might as well get as much done as possible. Okay, there we go.
Just must be the right texture for it's probably that's
And the
probably
right
something
height.
that's rare. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've never seen an elephant move like this, honestly. Oh yes, that felt like that looked like that felt good head shape. That's a
And
perfect
just to
way
clear things up
to,
in my head,
yeah,
Trishella, that elephants don't scent mark like a lot of other animals like that. So that probably was just relieving an itch that it had, or maybe I imagine maybe that underside of them too, like ticks or something, might latch on there, and they can't really groom themselves in that spot. Maybe another way they can relieve those parasites.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that particularly in the underbelly and that kind of the genital is particularly soft and vulnerable and also quite flappy. Lots of layers of thin skin, and when you find that right log that can do it for you, you definitely have to give it the best go. And they kind of look a little silly when they do it too, because they lose themselves completely in the euphoria of finding just that nice log.
Yeah, there was such a thing as
Anyway,
elephant yoga. That was one of the positions.
exactly. I'm not sure what we would call it, but we'd have to think about that for next. Um, once again, oh, everyone is laughing. I hope you'll join us again, and I really hope that your period of no biting insects but good weather lasts just a few days longer, and
Thanks so
that
much.
we'll see you again soon. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I had
oh, it's
fun.
always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. And thank you all for your questions and your comments. Apologies for the moment, but we will see you all again soon. And thank you for joining us. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.